This is the Authentic Dating series brought to you by Ahmad and David,
where we explore what it takes to have a dating life you're excited about.
Hi, I'm David.
I'm Ahmad.
And this is the Authentic Dating series. And on today's episode, we've got our good friend Kish back on.
Hey guys.
And we're going to be talking about a topic which we talk about in private a hell of a lot. And this is going to be around kind of race and dating. And you're going to hear from, one man who's Indian, Hindu. We've got a Mauritian Muslim here, and you've got a Jamaican black man here, all kind of British living. And we're going to talk about our experiences in dating and interracial dating and how race affects your dating life.
So, yeah, today's a very interesting topic because something that David and I have never mentioned on this podcast, even though it's very obvious from our graphic, is that David is black and I am brown. And we're wondering, in general, what are people's perceptions of us in dating? Especially, both David and I have grown up in this country, in the UK, in London. And we do have different experiences. And even for Kish today, you've come with some interesting ideas. So Kish, actually, you raised a point earlier, and I thought it's a very interesting one, actually, because despite the fact that we're both brown, and actually, even though my parents are originally from Mauritius, my heritage is actually from India as well. We do have very different experiences in dating, in the kind of women we meet, and I think more importantly, what they say to us.
And also, I think our view on race, is very different as well. So what we wanted to do was kind of break down initially the stereotypes of how people of color are perceived when it comes to dating in this point, and how black men are perceived and brown men are perceived as well,
and also Muslims are perceived as well, because it's a really poignant topic, especially in this day and age of I'm going to say fucking Brexit, right? That race is still a serious issue for people, and in the days now where terrorism is very prominent in the UK in terms of the politics, in terms of the security.
And the right-wing agenda growing as well. Yeah.
Exactly. And Islamophobia and stuff, how Muslims are perceived is a really poignant point in terms of dating. I know some other friends have had some really interesting experiences as well. So should we start by, how about we start by going over people's general perceptions that you experience? Kish, what's your experience when it comes to kind of your dating life? What are women's perceptions of an Indian kind of Hindu brown man?
Yeah, so I'm from an Indian background. I wouldn't say I'm per se Hindu, but I have parts of those beliefs, attached to me, and I would never say that. Let me think. So I would never say that these attributes are put on me, but I've felt this presence of these stereotypes, and not by per se the women I've dated. Actually, that's not often, but I know how I can sense how Indian men a lot of times are perceived. And
how do you think that is?
So I have this idea that so much of our perception about people is through either the media or our interactions with them.
Yeah.
Okay. Luckily, we're fortunate enough to live in London where it's so multicultural, and you are bound to bump into black men or brown guys, But otherwise, if you're not, all you know of brown guys is through the media.
Yeah.
And if you look at the media of brown guys, they're either the IT guy.
Yeah.
The taxi driver.
The IT guy from the IT guy.
Yeah, the IT guy from the IT.
Was it a Big Bang or was it IT guy?
Yeah, Big Bang.
Big Bang? Yeah, yeah. He's proper Indian guy,
it's so interesting. So if it's the IT guy or the taxi driver or the nerdy guy.
Driver,
I remember now that you're saying Big Bang Theory, I remember someone breaking down about this, and he was saying that Raj from Big Bang Theory, he's the only brown guy in that show, okay?
Yeah.
They're all nerds.
Yeah.
But he was the only person who didn't find a girl for the longest period of time. He was never able to speak to women.
Yeah.
Until 5-6 seasons, So if you look at it, they're all geeks. They're all nerds who aren't supposed to get girls.
But they do.
But they all did. But the brown guy didn't. How does that work? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so we're constantly told this narrative by Western media and by Hollywood that, brown guys, they're smart, they can fix your computer, but you know what? They can't get girls.
Yeah,
they're not smooth.
They're not socially kind of adept.
Yeah, and like they can't, they're not good with women.
Yeah,
we're constantly told this idea.
And I guess also in London, you kind of have, this is not to be. Also, you got to think about The Simpsons, right? Because Apu in The Simpsons, right, is a lot of people's first experience of like an Indian man, right? Yeah. So that's that. He run, what was it, like a 7-Eleven type thing, corner shop, and everyone knew him, and he had an Indian accent. Yeah. Loads of kids as well. Yeah, like he never saw his wife, or saw his wife every so often, and that's people's like first experience of like an Indian man.
And like I always struggle with this narrative that was told off me, because when people would be like, oh, when you're young, people assign characters to you. You're like, oh, in this TV show, who would you be? And when they said this to me, I was like, I'm not this guy. But you have no options, bruv. Because that's like, what you look like. It's either Apu or Raj. Like you have no other option. So you're only perceived one way, whereas, we're not a homogenous race. We're not a homogenous being. There's so many varieties. And I struggled with this idea because I was like, none of these people ever represented me. Ever represented me. And if you haven't had interactions with brown men, there's a huge chance you would think that brown men are like this. Oh, I remember when I was traveling, all the people, they were like, all they knew of Indian culture was Slumdog Millionaire.
Oh, wow.
Like, because
I guess because
that is the only thing, dude. Like, that's the only thing outside of the UK. There was a huge Hollywood film, it won Oscars and everything like that, but that's all they knew of India or Indian men,
Yeah.
And so you're talking about a population of like what? If you say India in general, 1.2 billion people, and if you take the diaspora, maybe it's like 1.4 billion people.
Oh no, you're probably looking closer to like 2 maybe. Well,
two,
if you include Bangladesh.
Yeah, I'm saying Indian men, but if you take brown men in general, easily.
Yeah. And then you've got all the Indians that have emigrated to the United States, to the UK. It's like,
so like 2 billion men, but you're only
1 billion men.
Huh?
Half the men. Half of them would be men.
Yeah, sure. Half of them are men. Yeah, all men.
Maths, eh? These Indians, they can't do maths, huh?
There is a lot of us, but you see. There's so many of us, but we're fit into these two categories. Yeah. Either the corner shop guy or the taxi guy or the IT guy.
Yeah.
Like what? We can't be someone else different.
That's true.
And so, I could, even though this was never put on me, but I could feel that people thought of us, if they didn't get to interact with us much, that they thought of us in a certain way. They were trying to put... Because humans are tribal anyway, and we always try to put people into boxes to figure out who they are.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I felt like people were trying to put me into a box. And I was like, no, I'm not this guy. And I tried to, I was not rebelling, but I was like, no, I want to represent myself. I don't want to be defined by my race. It's a part of me, but it's not who I am. And I'm not going to let you define who I am.
Yeah.
Or of what you think brown men or Indian men are like.
Yeah.
How about you, David, as, a big black guy?
A big black man, yeah. It's interesting, right? Because I'd say, like, I didn't really grow up. My family are Jamaican, if I full, everything about that. They both, my parents were born in Jamaica, and I grew up here, and they moved here when they were kind of in their late teens and stuff. And I'd say that, I grew up in London in the 90s, right? And the kind of perception of black men in the 90s was that they're dangerous. They're going to knife you. They're going to rob you, that kind of thing. And I'd say that, I remember going to uni, right? And in my first few weeks of uni, going out and partying. And actually, I should just take it further back than that. So I went to a school and it was very multicultural. I'd say, it's predominantly probably white and Asian. And there was more than a sprinkling of black people, right? But I grew up in a very multicultural life. So my best friends are like, Mauritian and Indian and Pakistani and Nigerian and Spanish and stuff like that. So I wouldn't say personally that I really kind of resonated with black culture and Jamaican culture and black people, because I grew up in a predominantly white middle class area. So then I go to university and I meet a lot of girls and they're like, oh, I've never met a black guy before. I've never been with a black guy before. And you're just kind of like, okay, yeah, cool. Right? Like they don't, and obviously they have a preconceived notion, right, from what they've seen in the media and a certain fear, right, of black men, because that's really what was being peddled during the 90s and even the early 2000s and arguably up to now. And I remember in my kind of 20s kind of dating and finding that you find this very stereotypical type of woman that is looking for a black man. They kind of maybe, and this sound a bit rude, but it's like, you know, you get these kind of larger white women looking for a black man, or you get, you know, I remember kind of more ghetto girls looking for a black guy, like a white, you know, sort of woman, or they're looking for a black man for a bit of a exotic experience. Right, and I must say, it's really something that like I kind of experience a lot. Yeah. And I also remember doing a lot of online dating. We were talking about this just now, right? Where you'd go onto online dating profiles, and this was going back to like Plenty of Fish. We're going probably like 10 years ago, where women would openly say, I'm not interested in black guys. I'm not interested in, I'm not interested in guys that aren't white. And that was very normal at the time. And I remember when we were coaching, there was a night I went out with a student, and we were in a club, and I got talking to this group of girls, and there was one guy I really kind of enjoyed talking to and dancing with, and we were really dancing and talking and laughing and joking at the bar. And I was like, look, I've got to leave now, so like I'd really like to see you again, like, you know, take your number, blah blah blah. And she was like, yeah, like I've really enjoyed talking to you, and you seem like a really nice guy, but I'm just not really into black guys. And I was like, okay, I get that, but I've experienced what we've experienced right now, and we had a really good time. Like, we had a lot of fun just now, right? She's like, yeah, I had great fun, and you're a really fun guy, and you're an attractive guy, but I'm not attracted to black guys. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting, right? Like, you know, in that moment, like, she was taking her kind of preconceived idea and kind of putting that on there. And I was like, okay, you know, cool. And it wasn't kind of the only time that happened in my 20s. So there's definitely that kind of preconception about black men that, you know, white men aren't necessarily attracted to them, or they seem as like something exotic or something a bit rebellious and dangerous. Yeah. And now what I get a lot is, you know, I meet women and I've, you know, dated a lot of white women in my time and Asian women and so forth. And you get that whole, oh, you're not what I thought you were going to be. You know, and sometimes I joke with that. And I'm like, what, did you mean to be a criminal or something? You think I was going to rob you from your iPhone?
It's so funny because I grew up in London. I had loads of black friends and brown friends, and like loads of black men were completely fetishized, and I saw that throughout my life. They would definitely fetishize me, like, oh yeah, you know, the big penis thing is a huge
penis thing is a massive factor.
Yeah, like, you know, there's a and it's that stereotype is also attached to black men. They're like, oh, they're supposed to be this way, you know. And also, I used to hear things with my black friends where they would tell me, or I would hear interactions where I met loads of women who would be like, I want to hook up with a black guy, you know, I want to have sex with him, but I'd never be in a relationship with him. Yeah. You know what I mean? They would be like, oh, I'll never introduce him to my parents, but I'll have fun with him.
Yeah.
You know, because that, like, it was 100% black men are fetishized, I think. For Indian men, I think it's brown men, it's very on the... I feel like we're on a different scale, actually.
It's on the opposite. It's like the opposite end.
Yeah, completely opposite. Yeah. But it's the same way, for example, for our listeners, I'm sure, for women, like East Asian women are fetishized. Because, you know, I have...
so you're just for our non-realizing listeners, you're meaning like kind of Chinese,
Japanese, Koreans,
Cambodians, Thais.
Some of my Chinese friends, they would say they were very cognizant and aware of when they went on a date to find out about the person they went on a date with, if it was normally a white guy, about his past history.
Of course, service record.
Yeah, because a couple of times when they heard about it, like, who did you date? They would all be Asian women.
Yeah.
And that's problematic because what's associated in media is of Asian women is like, the stereotype is like, oh, she's shy, she's timid, obedient, she's submissive. And my friends have been like, no, I'm not that girl, you know, and you expect me to be this person, because like we attach these stories and narratives to races and people, you know, and we think, oh, I want this person, so they're like this, you know. And my Chinese friends, the girls, they've had huge problems with this because they've struggled in dating because of this, and
because
they've been very cool.
All the men they're meeting are looking for this stereotypical
to fit into this Asian fetish,
Southeast,
you know?
Asian girl.
So they've been very careful with the guys they've dated and the white guys they've dated. Actually, they've been very, very cautious of that. Because they don't want to add to this, you know?
Yeah. So, yeah. And I'd say now as a black man, what I find is that I'm finding myself in spaces where there's no other black men. You know, like I go to a tantra school, and like there's a couple of black guys there. Like, but you imagine I'm sitting in a class of 40 people, and there's me and maybe one other black guy. You know, or I'm going to we used to go to a lot of like techno raves and enjoy that. And you go there, and it's not really a space where you find that many people of color, for instance. Or remember the festival we went to in Germany last year, right? We went to this beautiful festival called Fusion. And I don't think I saw another black person there the whole time.
It was like I think there was like one black guy.
Was there one black guy?
One other black guy, and there was one other brown guy.
Or David, we've gone out clubbing, and like white people have come up because they've seen you're the only black guys there, and they think you're shotting.
Yeah.
I remember the one time when I got so pissed off because it happened like we were just in a club, and 3-4 times I was like, dude, what the fuck? Like, fuck off, mate. Because he's the only black guy there. They think automatically he's shotting.
Yeah, come up with like, where can I get some drugs? I'm like, I don't know, bro.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, there's a guy over there, there's a white guy over there with a weird pouch, and his eyes look real fucked up. You should ask him.
Yeah.
To be fair, I mean, I had this in Mozambique.
So AJ, as a UK Muslim,
Yeah.
you know, what's your what do you think the perception of Muslims are here?
Well, the thing is, for me, what's interesting is because my brown complexion comes from Mauritius, which is it's not actually, for a lot of people, especially growing up, they didn't really know Mauritius. Everyone's heard of India, everyone's heard of Pakistan. People don't necessarily know Mauritius, and there isn't any particular racial slur against Mauritians.
Sure.
Like, what are you going to say? Oh, you like coconuts? Like, oh, what do you like? You like sandy beaches and shit. Like, so I've always been, I'd like to say kind of like, what's the word when you're kind of cotton wool sort of thing, like against that level. What does occur to me though is whenever I have been in a relationship with someone who's say, you know, English or white, from a predominantly white background, what often comes up is more their family's perception of who I will be and their concerns.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's actually what occurred to me, because even my girlfriend now, like her family, initially when they heard that she was dating someone of a Muslim background, one of their first questions is, oh, but what are you going to do if he decides to become more, strict and religious? Strict and religious. And see, the thing is for me though, is because of my upbringing, and where I've grown up and being raised in a predominantly white environment, an English environment, even though David and I went to the same school, but when I first moved to say the Wanstead area, I went to a primary school which was predominantly white, so from that age, I've always been in this environment, so it's always been very comfortable for me.
Yeah, totally, I get that. Really, for me, it's been, it's very normal for me to be the only black man in a place.
Yeah.
Sure.
Whether it be
Same, actually.
wherever it might be. On the street, in a bar, whatever.
Yeah.
It's just very normal for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've by and large, I've been very disassociated from the common like slurs or like negativisms, if that's a word, like regarding my color or regarding like my background. But yeah, just on the family thing. But even when that occurs, perhaps because of my mindset, like I was just sharing with you guys earlier, like, my ex-girlfriend, one of my ex-girlfriends was from Israel, and I went to visit her mum in the middle of a town called Petah Tikva in Israel, and she sat there across the table from me and was like, I don't agree with this, but because of my self-development background and just this kind of more worldly idea of things, I was just like, I completely understand where you're coming from, but I never took it on a racial level, and even I think even religiously, I've never been like super religious.
Yeah,
so
I think I'm the same.
So it's not that I haven't been affected, because I was saying this to the guys earlier. I was like, to be honest, I don't really know where I stand here, because I haven't technically been super affected. Like Kish has mentioned, girls have outwardly said, I've never been with a brown guy. I've never actually had that, but more the family aspect. It's more like that. Like, and I think for me, I think what really factors in, just in general, is that kind of like, it's like going to a black tie party wearing a white tux or some shit like that. It's like I'm always that guy with a white tux. It's like I'm always slightly different. I'm always standing out. Like,
see, like I think in some ways, Ahmed and I, we're both brown guys. If you looked at us, you wouldn't really know where our nationality was. You wouldn't be able to specifically say, we're this or this, So, and we've had similar experiences, and I don't think I've ever I've never been negatively affected by my race. No one's been like properly racist to me, you know. But I've been aware of how, like for example, like no one's ever said, "Oh, you're this, like this, or this," directly to me.
Yeah.
But or like the girls I've dated, of course, you know, if they're dating me, they're dating me for a reason. So, you know, they're not racist, you know. But I've been aware of how. I think I've been more aware of how brown men are perceived.
Yeah.
And there's this, you know, where this. I'm sure, David, I'm sure you feel this way more than me. There's this aura. You know what I mean? There's this aura where you can just tell that, or like the certain intentions of how people say something.
Yeah.
You're like, okay. Because David and I have traveled a lot, and like when we're in a hostel or whatever, we're always the only men of color. We're always, when I'm traveling, I'm always the only brown guy, and David's always the only black guy.
Yeah.
You know, you're with a bunch of white people, and like, I have no problem there at all. But I've been aware of like how people have maybe perceived, and like then they're a bit surprised sometimes how I am.
Yeah,
because I don't fit their mold.
Yeah. I think for me, it's like the perception. What's interesting for me is when I'm abroad and I'm traveling, the perception of black people is that you imagine they're around very open-minded people because right, they're traveling, they're staying in hostels, whatever, right? So their minds are very open. So they already reject the kind of standard media information they have because that they're you find someone in Colombia,
That's a
right?
good point.
They're already rejecting that, so their mind is open to being like, oh, there's someone in front of me who has this. I should have this preconceived idea about, but I want to find out really. So I find really in a hostel, people are fascinated by me. Like they just want to come and talk. I could go into a hostel in the morning, wake up, sit on a table on my own, an 8-people table, and I guarantee you the table will be full by the end of breakfast. Because people will just come and maybe that's something to do with my persona, my personality. But equally, people are very interested in being like, there's this black guy in the hostel. Like, where's he from?
Yeah.
You know? Oh, he might be American. And I give off that I very rarely do people think I'm American because they just don't get that vibe from me. So it's like I'm like a mystery. I'm a black man in a hostel in Bolivia. Like what the fuck's going on there? You know,
guys. I don't know, like in the audience, how many of you guys backpack or travel? And I can speak for this. And maybe some of you backpack and some of you don't. But it's so rare seeing people of color, and I don't think you guys. If you don't travel, you wouldn't know about it because you think like people of color, like Indians or black people, we go on holidays. But solo travel or backpacking is very rare, like very, very rare. You know, you go on family holidays or whatever, you know, to Miami or to India or Thailand. Yeah. But solo travelers or people of color is very rare because normally when you're in a hostel space, they're either German, English, Dutch, Australians,
Spanish, Italians,
so it's
Americans.
So it's very, very rare to see
and
it.
Within the Americans, like, you know, like I've met probably, and I'll be really honest, in 10 years of traveling, including my couple of trips I've done to Thailand, I reckon black Americans I've met in hostels, no more than 10. Like, and I'm talking, I probably met thousands of people, maybe tens of, like, really thousands of people.
For me,
and most of them, I must
maybe
say,
like 4 or 5.
A couple of them, most of them have probably been in Thailand and Rio.
Yeah.
Rio and Thailand, I've met most of them. If I'm really honest, I can think back because I've been to both places.
And also, these people of color are from Western countries. You
know
what I mean? Yeah. So it will never be an Indian. Hardly would be like Indian guy from India.
I've met a couple of Indians from India, but I've never met I definitely met one.
But black people.
I met a black Kenyan guy once.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. But
Rare
very
species.
rarely. Yeah. And I've met actually in Bolivia, in Samaipata. We've both been there, right?
Yeah.
There was a black guy from France. I met a few black guys from France.
Yeah. Black, sure, but again, a Western country, you know.
Western countries.
Otherwise, you don't. Yeah.
And the preconceived, you know, it's interesting within the dating world, the preconception of race, because, you know, it's fueled by the media, especially when you're in our Western countries. So I think the next point we want to really go on is talk about how, as men of colour, you know, browns and blacks here, that we've kind of gone beyond our stereotype and like how we've done that. Because we really get that, you know, for our guys out there, you know, you men of colour, like we say men of colour because it's an easier kind of umbrella for everyone, right? Is that there's a stereotype about you and you either live into that stereotype and let people kind of dictate how people think about you, or you empower yourself and act differently from that stereotype. And I think that all of us sitting here are definitely not stereotypically what people imagine. You know, you have to remember a stereotype is just a stereotype. It's not a whole system of how people are. But I think that, you know, I'm told very often I'm not stereotypically very black, by black people sometimes too, which is a whole other topic.
Is that your mum?
Probably. But yeah, so Kish, how would you say for you that you've kind of gone beyond your stereotype to kind of really define yourself individually outside of how people see kind of Indian men?
Because I always like, when we talk about this, you know, I always like to think about it. Like, if you told a girl to close her eyes and think of like a handsome guy or like you know, a sexy guy or whatever, a brown Indian guy is definitely not coming to your mind. I'm sorry, it's just maybe an Italian guy or a black guy, but a brown guy is just not coming to your mind. Okay, simple as that. And also, like I told you about how the stereotypes you attach to, or the nerdy guy, or you know, the IT guy, or you know, and the traditional Indian accent isn't the sexiest thing out in the world. You know? Like it's not, you know.
Not
but
traditionally.
So whenever people have subliminally tried to put this on me, you know, I'm just not putting up with it at all.
Yeah.
You know, I will not let anyone define who I am.
Yeah.
You know, and like, because I like really challenging perspectives because we're not homogenous. You know, I like, again, to go with it, I am Indian. It's a part of who I am, but it doesn't define me. So I am my own being, you know, and so I don't want people to put these aspects on me. So I just go about my life and like live my life and not let anyone challenge that, because I know who I am, you know. I really know who I am, and I don't want people to be like, oh, you're an Indian guy so you can't get girls, or you're an Indian guy so you can't do this, because sometimes I've felt it from other guys, some white guys, where they're like, oh, he's an Indian guy, oh, he can't do anything. And then when I've approached girls and I've, you know, we've interacted well, sometimes they're surprised. They're like, oh, how did he do it? You know? And so I think that's all. And the same way, like I've seen women I've dated or I've had good connections with, they've been like, oh, I've never been attracted to a brown guy until it was you, you know, or like I've never dated a brown guy. And I always think like, oh, why not? Like, what's the, you know, why not? You know, what stopped you or whatever, you know? So I've heard that multiple times. Yeah. Okay. Because like I said, you know, when you think of a handsome or sexy guy, a brown guy doesn't come to your head. But it's just because I'm living my life and I'm not letting any of these stereotypes affect me.
And then also, like on top of that, like just in case you haven't listened to the previous episode we did with Kish, episode 21, where we really went into kind of, you know, how he dates and also his passions, is like he's really in the creative world, right? Which isn't necessarily what you would stereotypically kind of put with the brown man. As you said, like the IT guy is going to fix your computer, the Apu in the shop. You know, Kish is out there, you know, he's an amazing photographer and he's telling beautiful stories about people in lands that, you know, you've probably never really known much about, but he's showing a very beautiful and powerful side to their lives, right? And it must be, even that side of what you're doing isn't typically kind of, and also it's a lot of like self development and confidence and building up to the character I am and who I am, and like this terminology I've said a couple of times, you know, and I think it can be not controversial if it's not if you don't listen to it properly. Where there is a difference between like confidence and arrogance. You know, I've built on like my confidence a long while, you know, where I say this statement where I think I have the possibility of getting any girl. I'm not saying I can get any girl, but I'm saying I have the possibility. So I'm giving myself all that chance. I'm not putting anyone on a pedestal because I feel like all humans are the same, you know? Okay. So why am I going to let anything affect me? You know, to who I am. I'm like, she's just another person. She's not a white girl, a brown girl, a black girl. She's just another person that I'm going to get to know. Why would I let anything affect me? You know, because I feel like so many people are like, oh, you're a brown guy, you can't get her. Oh, you're this. I'm like, no, I'm not going to adhere to this shit. You know, I think that, because I know myself in that. And I think when I was talking about the confidence, arrogance thing, like people can misconstrue that. But you have to think about how
you're only seeing a fragment of who I am now, and you don't see all the work I've put in to get to this point, to be comfortable with who I am and my being and everything like that. And I think people, like, I feel like men of color and brown men should take that on and be like, dude, you don't need a validation from anyone, you know?
Yeah.
You know, like, you can be who you are.
You don't have
you know,
you can go beyond
you can go beyond your race and like
programming.
what your stereotype is supposed to be like. Don't let that limit you.
Yeah.
You know, that's the thing. Like, just do what you want to do, you know, talk to whoever you want to. You know, if you really find someone attractive, approach them, you know. Don't be like, oh, I can't do it. And
because
sometimes
she won't like me because I'm brown.
Yeah, sure. Or comparing them to other races or whatever.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, I saw her talking to these white guys, so obviously she likes white guys.
Yeah,
or
sure.
I know she's black, and she's black and black girls.
Oh, she only likes black guys. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. So I guess I really get that. As going beyond, and I guess for myself, what have I done really to go beyond that? I think it's just being, you know, if I'll be honest, like I said before, like I don't really resonate that much strongly with kind of black culture because it just wasn't what I grew up in. So I've always been interested in, like, travel, for instance, was something that was really interesting to me. And when I got to 24 and I did my first trip, and I traveled my first solo kind of trip, and I did it as part of a group tour, was to Russia, Mongolia, and China in 2008. Sorry, God, I'm not that old. And when I was going, right, people I met, like my mum was just like, "You're going to Russia? What?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm going to Russia." And she was like sending me these articles of all these racist attacks that have been happening to like black people in Russia and happened to Indians going to Russia. And she was like, "Are you sure you want to go here?" And I was like, "Mum, it'll be fine. It'll be cool. Like, it's cool." And even when I was there, you know, people at home were checking on me constantly, and I was in Russia. And I tell you what, Russians were absolutely lovely. They were so kind and nice. They were incredibly intrigued.
Yeah, I remember you were telling me this,
like,
and
really
I was
intrigued
surprised
about like where I was from, and you know,
saying.
you get that standard question when you're traveling, and I know Kish, you know this one well. Is like, "Oh, where are you from?" And you're like, "Oh yeah, I'm from England, or I'm from London," and they're like, "No, like, where are you really from?" And then I'd be like, "No, I'm really from England. That's where I was born." And they're like, no, like, where are you really from? And you're like, "Oh, you want to know my heritage?" And they go, no, my family are from Jamaica." "Oh, so you're from Jamaica?" Like, no, I'm not from Jamaica. I've never lived there. I wasn't born there. I've been there like a handful of times. So I'm British, like, really. And this is something you deal with a lot when you travel. But to go beyond, like, traveling has differentiated me from the kind of average black man, really. And like, I'm not just talking about holidays. Like, you know, I did a month traveling on the Trans-Siberian. I've done a 6-week trip to South America. I've done a year and almost 2 years trip around the world. But I've island hop around Greece and, you know, and visit Australia and all these places.
Well, what's interesting, because I know David, is that when you're saying you don't sometimes identify with black culture or fit in, but also, like, the thing is, you guys don't know what David looks like, but he's like 6'3", huge. You know, if you think of a typical black guy, David could easily fit that mold. You know,
yeah.
But knowing you strongly identify with your black identity, and you know the heritage and the history of black
I'm very
people,
aware
you know?
of
you're
blackness.
very aware of that, and you don't, like, you educate people on that.
Yeah,
you
because
know?
I think, like, I've gone out of my way to learn about black history and black culture, and whether it be like slavery,
more so than many people. You know?
Yeah, the history of black people in the UK, or you know, even when I remember being in India, and this guy was explaining to me how there's a village of black people that live in India, and I was like, oh man, like, is there? And I started to like Google how I could get there. And I don't remember exactly where it was now, but it was like so far from when I was, and it was like really far from the nearest like main city and far from the nearest town.
I think they call, I want to say Sindhis or something like that.
Yeah, I think you're right, you know.
Yeah.
And I just didn't work out that I could make it there, right? And so I'm very interested in these things, but it's, you know, my family from Jamaica, and I'm not even that keen on fucking reggae. Like, I like reggae, but I'm not like a massive fan.
I love reggae.
And, you know, I travel and people are like, oh, Bob Marley. But what I'm really interested in really is, like, you know, I love to learn about other cultures, and I'm extremely open-minded. Like, anyone that knows me realizes I'm really open to anything. You know, people talk to me about any subject, I'm going to listen and learn, and I'll try any food and all these things. And this is just a lot of things that I saw with the black people that I grew up with that they weren't interested in. you know, like I always had this stereotypical joke is like, if you go to a restaurant with someone who's black and go, okay, how would you like this steak? They kind of look at the waiter like, what do you mean, how do I want my steak? I want my steak cooked. You know, I don't want it like bloody or anything like that. So I remember being young and my mum just would be like, no, well done steak. And it was just something I always did. And at one point I was like, oh, I'm with these other people and they get theirs medium. Let me try mine medium. And I suddenly was like, medium steak is really good. Like, I know it's a bit bloody because I was taught that if it was bloody, it wasn't cooked. Like, that's a really basic thing that you kind of grow up learning. But for me, it's like just learning about the world and learning about people and be really interested in things like, you know, this, my spiritual kind of exploits beyond religion. Like, I've always been I learned to be very quite anti-religion, to be honest, because I think it's just another control system, another way to indoctrinate people, especially, you know, to be honest, black people. Imagine that black people were enslaved and then given a religion which helped enslave them, you know? And I saw this at a young age and being like, how dysfunctional is that? You know, like, you know, black people go to church and pray to white Jesus. Jesus probably wasn't white. He was from the Middle East.
Man, I had that in South America when I found out about the culture in South America and how the Spanish took colonize them and then force religion on them and then made feel guilty about their race. And I was like, it was super sad.
So for me, how I've gone beyond is just by being like, I'm very different. I can be quite flamboyant and just being like highly educated about the world. And because I'm really interested in learning about people and the world. So when women meet me and they kind of expecting this kind of thug life, 2-pack, I don't know, you know, like they find some grime artist and I'm out here talking to them about techno music and my travels in Bolivia. That's not what they're expecting, right? Or when I've traveled and I meet women in the same thing and they're, you know, they're talking to me and all they've known is 50 Cent and Usher or whatever, right? And I'm not like that.
It's so interesting to hear about the different narratives that you hear about. It's like it's on the complete different opposite spectrums.
Yeah, for black people, most people,
black people and brown
you know
people.
about musicians and sprinters and runners, right? Really, sportsmen. That's what people know. Yeah. And I'm all right at football. I'm not that great. I ran as a kid, but I'm not that fast. And as for acting, like I'm pretty useless. So yeah, AJ, what about you, Mr. Young British Muslim?
Well, yeah, it's interesting listening to you guys talk about it because really. From my experience of both of you guys, and obviously I know my own experience, but it's just like in terms of the dating realm, as much as we come from these different backgrounds, I think that our lives have actually led us in a more pioneering way. Like we've all. Well,
what do you mean by that?
So. You were born in India, and you said at the age of 9 you were brought over to the UK. You were raised in the UK.
Sure.
So as much as you do have a simmer of your Indian accent there, you know, but it's not like a heavy Indian accent. And your culture though is completely, you know, how do you say, like steeped in the UK and what you've learned and the mixture of it. Was Were you always in Clapham? Was it you said?
Yeah, pretty much always. Clapham. So I like I'm tied in parts to my cultural roots, but I feel like so much of who you are and is formed in your adolescence and your later life. So I feel very much British and like I'm more of a Londoner than anything else, you know.
Yeah, and same for David and same for myself in a sense that like what can I say? But like thanks to my parents for actually making the move over from Mauritius to the UK, and that I was raised here and raised in this culture. They are the ones that really went through the boundaries and barriers of race, so that I could grow up in a sort of in a culture where for me it became more of a like, oh, this is how life is. This is what life is. And this is normal. I will function inside of this. This is the playground.
They did the hard work.
Yeah, this is the playground. Yeah. This is where I shall function. And so, in terms of dating, like taking it back to dating, guys. in terms of dating, and what we were talking about in terms of stereotypes, then for me, the typical stereotypes, as I was saying, I mean, obviously when I was young, I mentioned to you guys before, there was a couple of like racist incidents, but because I'm from a Mauritian background, no one ever had anything to say to me specifically, nor was it anything that I was aware of that was offensive to me personally.
Because it
wasn't targeted at me.
Maybe targeted like Pakistanis or Indians.
Yeah,
and you were like, well, I'm not either of those.
I'm not. Yeah, the naming. So, but then in regards to dating, then it was never really a factor, other than my skin color is different to the predominant skin color of the race of the people of this country. So really, in that sense, I felt kind of more free. And when I say pioneer, it's like, you know, for yourself to be just like, I'm just going to go traveling. I'm just going to go do this. And for yourself, it's like boom. I'm just going to go rather than go, I I can't do that.
This because
Yeah.
people like me don't do that.
And then the funny thing is, what's very interesting about the three of us is it's almost like, I was trying to think of the word, like, but it's like a test group. It's like we're not as affected. And if anything, so here's a funny thing that happened. And I was telling you, David, about this earlier. So my girlfriend was, this couple of guys I was talking to her yesterday. One was a Chinese guy, and I think one was a brown guy. The guys that they were asking, they just said, "Hey, you're a pretty girl. Can you have a look at my Tinder profile?"
Sounds like they're hitting on it, bro.
Yeah, it did sound like that. But it's like, can you have a look at my Tinder profile? I thought it was a very unique approach, you know? It's like, here's my Tinder profile. Taking it back to the online dating, bro. They can't get away from it. And then when they were saying like they had to be a certain way. They can't so she looked at the Tinder profile and she was like, it's cool and all what you created, but you know, there was something about it that she was like, why don't you just be yourself, like be more yourself? And like, oh, that's not going to work. Like, we're not like white, tall, handsome, blah, blah, blah. And she was like, well, what are you talking about? Like, my boyfriend and one of his best mates, they run this podcast and it's about dating and they're themselves. And they're like, oh, they must be tall, white, da, 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 da. And she's like, no, my boyfriend's brown and his best friend's black. And, you know, and both of them are just being them. And that's why, you know, they're attractive because they're being them. And I think what's really interesting is, again, listening, because there is it's not to say that it doesn't exist. It definitely exists, you know, this issue. But what's interesting for us is like, we were born in a culture where it was like, go be. Like, go be. Like, no one should ever tell you anything otherwise.
See, it's very true because we're the first generation and we feel like our parents felt like they had to fit in, okay? Whereas we're like, no, we're from here. Yeah. We can be whoever we want to be, you know? They were like, we don't cause any disruption. We're like, no, we want to fuck shit up. You know what I mean? But what you were talking about with the bar scenario, what we have to be really aware of is that the colonial mindset is very strong and it's very present, you know, like among, you know, African culture and like South Asian culture, you know, like when, you know, the British, like colonized us for 200 years, you know, and they said, you know, adhere to look up to
the mother country.
You know, look up to the mother country and look up to white men. And also like if anyone's from is Indian or brown, they would know that, you know, in Indian culture, it's like
the top caste.
Like the whiter you are, you're considered the better looking you are.
And to be honest, in black culture, it's no different.
Yeah. You know, of course, when, you know,
skin.
dude, we always heard like black guys be like, when I grew up, I was like, she's lighty.
I want a light skinned girl.
Yeah. And so it's like this thing has been forced upon us where we're supposed to, I feel like, you know, it's subtle, but it's present where we're seeking validation from white people and other people who are like, we're seeking validation, be like, oh, you know, because if they're the winners, we have to be like them. And only then we'll be accepted. You know, and I think it's internal because it's from childhood. If from childhood, when you see it, like I hear it, like even parts of my other family, they're like, oh, yeah, she could be a bit fairer, or don't keep her on the sun, or this, or like my sister, my sister just had a baby, and like my extended family say this stuff, and I'm like, dude, this baby is like 1 year old, like, and you're already putting this shit on her, you know, and. So if this carries through to you, even if you're living in a multicultural society like in the UK, you will go to be like, oh, I have to look up to the white man. Yeah,
because what you see is...
You know, you're valuing the race rather than the character of a person, you know?
And it's a case of, like, it's interesting you talk about what they said to the babies. I never forget one of my great aunties who's dead now. And I'd like to say God rest her soul, but she was an evil fucking woman. She really was horrible. And I'm not going to lie. if my sisters are listening to this, they will laugh along and agree. One day she had fallen in a hospital and slipped on some water in a hospital and broken her hip. So I went to the hospital with my mum to go and see her. And I went in there as like 10, 11 years old, I think. You know, I thought, I'll go and see her. She's an old woman, you know, you make sure she's okay. I come in and I sit down in the chair and she just looks at me and says, She goes, why am I so black, sir? And like, if you know black communities, like, saying how dark someone is actually quite a slur upon someone, you know? Like, it's actually seen as being like quite an insult. And I remember sitting and imagine this though, more interesting. As an 11-year-old, I knew how much of an insult that was, right? And like my mum was like shocked at what she just said and blah, blah, blah. But it's really interesting to see how, you know, the lighter your skin, the more desirable you are. Now I know within black people it really goes back to slavery, right? And the whole thing with like the house the house Negroes would be, you know, the lighter skinned ones who their parents would have been raped by the slave masters. So, you know, they get to be indoors over the darker ones who are outside in the field. And that's continued into our culture today. Like, and I know we're super getting off topic here, but like, it's a really,
I think
because it's really there. Like, I see
because
within Asian communities, it's like, oh, the fairer she is, the more beautiful she is. And I know there's a bit of a backlash now within the black communities, like, you know, because of things like bleaching cream and stuff like that, to go, actually, just because someone's dark skin doesn't mean they're not attractive. But within the dating world, like, you know, it must be quite difficult for women, especially. I think it's much harder.
See, like, I think why Dave and I are raising these points is because it's not come out of nothing, you know. It's there's a history behind this, you know, and especially if you're talking about dating within your own race itself, you know, it's a big thing, man. Like, it's definitely, if you're a brown guy and you're dating a girl, you know, and if she's a bit darker, they say something. Or it's the same way, if she's like, if the guy is darker than the girl, then they're like, oh, okay, you know. And so it's not just outside your race, there's internal racism within your race as well. There's colorism,
That's
right?
actually fascinating as well, because again, it's again something that I've been it's not really been in my culture, that and I do get that caste system in India, like, so true. Like, it's not something that in Mauritius they've really, well, I say in Mauritius, but for me, from Mauritian heritage in the UK, it's not something I ever came across, but I've heard about. So it's weird, like, for me, kind of like listening to this and going, this is it's very interesting, and I know people have gone through this, but equally for me as a stereotype, personally, when I really think about my own dating life, it's never really been a factor, other than, you know, their parents maybe having a concern with the fact that their daughter was dating a brown guy. And then for me, again, it's just because I've lived in this culture being like, fuck you, like, it's a free world, and being more like that. And so it's like, it's what I'm getting is like, and I know this is, I know for you, Kish, there was like a really big impetus, but it wasn't really so much for you. It was more for like other brown guys, other black guys who feel they've been boxed in, or that they can't break out of this label. Yeah,
because David and I have talked about this, but you know, that's the thing. I feel like I have some brown friends, you know, or some black friends, and they say certain things and they let their race define them, or how other people view their race define them. And I find it so problematic, and I feel it's a bit sad, because I'm like, oh no, man, don't let this affect you. Like, you know, like, your race is beautiful, your skin color is beautiful, your heritage is beautiful. You know, highlight that, you know, don't like think that's a negative thing and try to aspire to something else you're not, you know. You're never going to be a white guy or whatever, you know. You're never going to be that. So really own in on who you are, and like that, and your heritage and your nationality, you know, and like let it be a part of you, you know.
I guess it's difficult when there's so much negativity around it, right?
And also it's really hard. Like, what we're trying to talk about, it's like systematic, institutionalized racism that's around. It's so hard to fight back against, and it's prevalent. It's really prevalent.
Something really recent is Raheem Sterling, and like the stuff that's been happening to him. He's been like racially abused multiple times, right? Like, if you go from a footballing point of view, imagine Montenegro, their fans racially abused the England players, right, on the pitch, and I think they've been punished with a fine. It's like a tiny fine. Racism's illegal in Europe. It's illegal, right? And you had 4,000 fans doing something that's illegal, and no one's been charged. Like, you know, just break it down and be really honest, right? So it's, when that happens, it's like, oh wow, like, do people really care in this day and age? And again, I know I've just moved completely off topic, but it's like, it's really interesting, because what Raheem Sterling was saying was the difference in the treatment between black players and white players. And he really just put up an article that was like, oh, there's this black player and they're talking about how frivolous he is with his money, blah, 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 versus this white player where they're saying how sensible and nice and decent he is for spending his money. And they did the same thing. They bought their parents' houses, right? But it's really interesting in the media how you're portrayed. And like, I've been very aware, I've been incredibly aware, I think, as I've grown up, how black people are portrayed. And I will be really honest and say there's definitely a point in my life where I didn't want to be associated with being black. Because I didn't see anything really positive even around me, to be honest.
So you've been affected by that as well?
Yeah, massively. Because I was like, well, all the black people I know in my life, I don't really want to be like them. Like the older generation of people that I knew when I was young, and the black people I know at my age who were like, I'm remembering at school, and all these kids, a lot of the boys were just doing was like causing trouble, getting in fights, doing all this shit. And I was like, well, I just want to fucking study and get a good degree and get some money and leave. And it wasn't really till I got to university that I met like black people who were also like, oh, I want to learn and educate myself and do sport and further myself in my life, right? That was kind of, for me, one of the first times that I come across people.
See, that's the thing,
like
where I think it's done by other races and yourself as well, where like, you know, where it's like white people can be anyone they want.
Yes.
And you can only be one, you know, and like you do it yourself and it's done by other people as well. And you know, because you're not like, you're not homogenous, you know, that's the thing.
There is that in general. I mean, since we're now discussing race in general, there is that idea, it's not even an idea. It's in practice that as a person of color, you have to work twice as hard to achieve something.
My mum used to tell me at school, she'd be like, you need to work twice as hard as the white kids because you're black. And she told my sister the same thing. And you know what? We really listened because we worked twice as hard, right? But there's a real dysfunction in telling kids that, because what you're telling them is you'll never be as good as someone who's white.
Yeah.
And you don't, and that's internalized, and you never really can rid yourself of this programming. So like when you're saying about like your black and brown friends being like trying to be white and they want to be and aspiring to be, and a lot of that comes
not
from
trying to be white, but they feel like they need some validation.
Yeah,
or
but
like,
a lot of that comes from what their parents have probably told them, right? And their environment has bred in them.
There is something else that comes to mind in regards to this whole race topic, and especially in dating, and it's actually more internal. You know, we were talking earlier about in terms of dating outside the race, and how internally from our own families, from our own cultures, how they react to our personal choices of who and preferences. Like, you know, like it's not racist to have a preference in terms of what you want to date. You know, it's a choice. It's racist to have hate against someone, but it's not racist to have a preference.
We were talking about this because I don't think, you can have a racial preference, and I don't think that's racist. You know, because it doesn't involve hate. You know, you're attracted to someone. You know, sometimes you're attracted to a different skin color more than others, but I don't think that's racist.
And I think for me, in general, like in terms of my upbringing, that's probably been the bigger kind of theme would have been more like internal pressure of like who I should be dating. Even the idea that, you know, it's best to stick to a girl who's from Mauritius because the culture is the same and there'll be less problems. And I remember someone saying this to me once, and I'm like, no, like, come on, like, so-and-so, they're both Mauritian and they're both like from the same religion and they had fucking issues. And then it's the same fucking, it doesn't matter who's who. It's like,
I've definitely faced the exact same thing.
So it's interesting because it's like in terms of, we're talking about stereotypes and like as much as there's the external to whom we are, there's also the internal of, oh, we must stick together and band together. And if you don't, you are now going against us as a people, and also there's a fear mongering of like, oh, it's not going to work because such and such is a different thing, and so that's just something that came to mind as we're hitting the 1 hour mark.
So we're gonna. I think we should get into like the experience of dating outside your race. I think that's a big topic for the people who are probably listening.
Well, I don't have much experience in it at all.
We're probably the most experienced people in London sitting here. I would say, like, I remember my first girlfriend was of Pakistani origin. I remember walking down the street in Wanstead.
George is Mauritian.
No. And I remember walking down the street and the group of black girls walked by and the comment was, oh, I've seen Save the Last Dance, but this shit's fucking crazy. Oh. Right? And she was walking past the two of us. And I remember being like, walking and being like, what the fuck does that mean? Kind of thing, you know? And, you know, I've experienced, you know, I've dated a lot of white women, I've dated Asian women in my life. And I've experienced, especially in my younger years, probably not so much now, is like quite a lot of kind of hatred from black women. And I really get it because there's a feeling that for black women that black men don't want to date them, right? So I've really kind of had that kind of backlash for me. But my experience has been that, yeah, I've had some issues, like even from my family as well. You know, it's been something. So yeah, so like, you know, you face kind of internal prejudice from within your race, but what we're going to go back into really right now is like how, we've been able to, and I think something that a lot of people are concerned about is dating outside the race and the possibility of doing so. But we're sitting here with three men who have been, I feel like we don't really see color. We're just like, if there's people around us that we love speaking to and spending time with, then
definitely,
like women especially, then we're like, oh, amazing, we'll date you and be with you, right? So Kish, like what do you feel like your experience has been with, dating outside of your race?
Yeah, I think I completely agree with you where, like, for me, I don't really care what race someone is, like if I connect with them, I connect with them. Why would I say I'm only going to date this person or this person? Because I feel like I can miss out on a beautiful connection, so I don't want to. And I'm also, because I travel a lot, I'm really interested in different cultures and what I could learn about them and what they can teach me and introduce that part. I think that's fascinating, because it's so much, your race is so much tied into culture and music and like dance and so many of these factors, and like that really interests me actually in a relationship, someone who has, some flavor.
Some flavor.
But
some sauce.
Like,
some white sauce.
I've dated women,
German sauce.
Germans or Dutch girls or
Some
English
sauce.
girls. And
Salsa
like,
picante.
yeah, and like, but I enjoy it because, like, especially if someone's of two different cultures, I like, how much I'm a product of the UK. I'm also a product of my Indian heritage, and I like introducing that to them, because like South Indian, I'm South Indian, and South Indian food is very different. So I take them to like a really authentic South Indian restaurant. I'm like, and we eat with our hands. I'm like, come in.
You go to Savnavan Bhavan.
Savnavan,
Oh, I love that place, man.
And we go there, and I'm like, I give them dosa and idli, and then I tell them that we eat with our hands. So I'm sharing a part of my culture with them, that they might have known about. And it's the same thing when let's say I dated someone who was Portuguese, and they introduced me to Portuguese music about fado and stuff that I didn't really know about, and I loved it, man, because I would have never known about this otherwise, you know. And they really introduced me to that side of Portugal. And when I go back to Portugal now, and I have a connection of sort, and I think it's beautiful. Like guys, you have to think about now we're gonna live in a globalized platform now. That you're gonna have interact with people of all colors, races, cultures, and where diminishing what it means to be like a human being, and we're getting everything centralized. So I think it's amazing having the opportunity to build a relationship or a connection with someone outside your race. I think within your race as well, it's amazing as well. But if you get that chance, take it, like
at least explore it,
and like
don't write it off just because of the color of someone's skin or the religion that they come from.
Because I feel like loads of Indian guys are like, no, I just want to date this kind of girl, and I'm like, no, why not? Like, sure, Indian girls are amazing, but why not? Why don't you date someone outside of your race as well? Because you might learn something that you never expected. And
I actually, from having my own in-depth experience from dating outside is
very in depth.
Yeah, definitely. Is one of the things I would have to say is what people don't necessarily, they could get excited by the idea and whatnot, but what they don't maybe take into account, what you must be ready for is to be open. Like, I think, and this is where, again, when I say we're like pioneering in, not like, because of the actions we take or we're special, no, but we have that sort of almost like a gene that we're like, we want to try, we want to see something outside of what we already know. And it's just to be aware that comes with its own challenges. But for us, we are open to embrace such challenges. And we were just talking about this earlier in terms of like culture and, in future. None of us have kids at the moment, not that we know of. But like in the future, like how we would raise and actually being aware that actually the partner that you choose will not dictate, but will have an impact. And also that one must be open. Otherwise, you're going to be in for a bad time if you're thinking that you're going to go and try something, but you're going to somehow impose everything that you had before into this new, a bit like how the Americans do when they go to Mexico and Cancun. It's like, we just have the same, what we have. But, and so the only point I make, and it's not like a negative, is actually saying like, this is the truth. Like, don't think it's all going to be like airy fairy, but this is the truth of the matter. Is like it is a different culture.
Yeah.
It's two ways.
Sure.
It's a two-way
You
thing.
need to be open to theirs, and they need to be open to yours.
Yeah. So and it can be very beautiful, and definitely you will learn so much that you would never have heard of before.
Yeah, and it can equally be, it's slightly problematic as well, right? There'll be some issues that come up you have to deal with. It's
Definitely.
The issues that I found is only ever internally with like family who maybe not even your like your first primary family, but like family culture in general, where they disagree or they have words to say. But again, I think for all of us sitting here, we just be like whatever, like we just like, well, that's your problem.
See, I because like in that aspect, I can definitely talk about it where my immediate family will accept whoever I bring, but my extended family do want me to get in relationship with like an Tamil girl or an Indian girl or Hindu girl, and if I didn't, they will be accepting. But I was telling Ahmed this, I will actually have a lot of pressure to make it work.
Yeah.
Because if I married a white girl or someone else, they'll be like, and if it did, and I feel that because I feel like I have a lot of pressure to make it work because they're telling me like, oh, if you married a Tamil girl, it'd be a lot easier, But and whereas I'm thinking, no, like the chance of success or failing, it doesn't matter because of your race,
Depends on the people.
It depends on the people, right? But so not letting that affect you, actually be like, who you are, and like if it didn't work, it didn't work, There's nothing you can do about it, But at least you were, what you wanted to go for, and you just didn't let yourself limit to that, and be fearful of what could happen.
You have to, again, we do speak from this space, and I think it's something that's really important for any man who's in any particular situation, is you have to own your choices. You have to stand by it. It's not their fault. It's not, some other, but no, this is your life. You have to take it by the horns and say, this is what I want, this is what I'm doing, and I'm happy with that. And if it fucks up, I'm also happy to take the responsibility, because otherwise, there is nothing to stand on.
Yeah.
Be bold.
So wow, I feel like this is a really, I think it's a really deep topic for all of us, right? Something we probably sometimes gloss over on the podcast about our actual race, actually, because we grew up in a space where we don't see it as being such an issue. But I'd like to see, what tips do we have for, some brown guys, like really on the road tips that they can on the road. Roadman tips. Get some roadman tips.
Roadman tips.
Some goat tips.
Tips.
Big up my Ethiopian people and their tips. So
I don't get that joke.
Okay.
So Tibbs is in Ethiopia. Tibbs is like lamb.
It's like a dish.
It's a lamb.
So you can get like lamb tips, goat tips, spicy tips,
fire tips.
Fire tips. I love that, fire tips.
Some inside jokes there.
So what tips would you have for a young, Indian man growing up in London who's thinking, I don't know if I resonate more with British culture, so I'd like to date British women over.
I think more and more so it's not happening, because I feel like we are gonna we have no chance now in London. You are gonna meet people outside your race, and you are gonna date people outside your race. It's almost inevitable. No, you can't stop this at all.
I think what you said earlier actually about connection, putting that, allowing that.
Exactly.
You said about the woman rather in the past who was like, oh, you're attractive, you're nice. However, I don't feel attracted to black people. It's like, hang on, what the fuck did you just say? You just said, but actually being like, oh no, this is something that it's a possibility. It's an opportunity.
Like the reason why we wanted to, when we were discussing why we wanted to do this topic and everything, and it came about, was just that because through our experiences, we don't want anything to define by, what you didn't choose. You didn't choose your race.
No.
You didn't choose to be brown or black. And then there's narrative that the media or the world has set. Don't let that, make it a part of you, but don't let it define who you are. Go break beyond that mold, and think that you can do whatever you want, and don't feel like it's limiting you. Make it seem like it's actually a part of you, and like it empowers you and strengthens you, your identity, your culture, heritage. you're from a great culture, let that empower you. Don't feel like, I can't do this because of my race.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to get across, actually.
Yeah. I'd say also
Because you're talking to three people who've not let any of that define us. We haven't let that. We've just gone beyond that. We feel that we're open to anyone, and that we can do whatever we want. We can date whoever we want.
So from just quickly, we'll go into this one, right? Because I know this is something that I've spoken to both of you about before. How do you deal with the family aspect? What tips do you have for someone who is a brown man and he wants to bring home his his Spanish girlfriend, for instance, Ahmad?
Well, I feel like this is a whole another podcast, really. We're going to have to do some seminars on this, workshops and breakout groups. Well, it's going back to what I was saying before about being your own man and living by your own choices, and knowing that actually, as Kish was wrapping up his piece there, what came back to my mind was about wrapping up his piece. What came back to my mind was what the premise of this podcast is, and it's about having a dating life that you're excited about. And if you want to have a life that you're excited about, and the dating life being a subset of your life, then you have to be willing to go for what you want. Yeah. And that means in the face of rejection, in the face of denial, even from your own family. And the thing is, it's like, if you make a choice and you say, okay, I want to go date this person who's different to my culture and my family are not happy, and then they tell you, no, you shouldn't do this, and you go, okay, fine, I'm not going to do it, and then now you spend the rest of your life unhappy, who's winning? Yeah. Like, the family may feel that they've done you a service, but in the long run, you have to live by your choices. And we were having this discussion about a friend of ours before who followed his family's choices, and now he's deeply unhappy with certain things. And maybe in time he'll come to understand his own choices. But this is what we're bringing it down to. And it's like, you have to be able to go, right, this is what I want, and I'm going for it. And if people are not happy about it, then such and so be it, because this is my life. And it's not about specifically going and disowning and disrupting and being, we're very peaceful and go, this is my life.
Yeah. See, I think this is a good point, because we're going to face this more and more in a globalized platform like ours, where it's it's your family background and then the new world that you're thrust upon, where you're like, oh, I want to explore these options. I want to, date beyond my culture and race, but also you're like, oh, but it wouldn't fit in my family, or what would they think, or they want to be with someone. So I think loads of people of color are going to face this battle. Yes. Now it's going to happen, So I think you have to be ready for it, and also, ready to face this challenge, and also, but have such a conviction that what you're doing is right at this moment, and just not let it limit you.
Totally. Okay, I think we'll wrap up there. We're really getting into it. So I would love to recap, but we just went through so much. Like, if you need to recap, just listen back. I think we talked a lot about the standard stereotypes about our races, and how we went beyond those stereotypes, and our experiences of of dating within outside of our races, and also we kind of talked about dealing with the kind of family and external pressures that you get as well, right? In that. So, if you want to get in contact with us at Authentic Dating Series, you can find us on Instagram at Authentic Dating Series, or you can email us at hello@authenticdatingseries.com. You can talk about your experiences. We'd love to hear a bit more. And Kish, where can people get in contact with you?
You can find me on my Instagram. It's at Kishanth, Kishanth.
Yeah. Cool. So awesome, guys.
And Kish, thanks again for coming down and being on the show. Always lovely to have you.
Thank you guys for having me. I've really enjoyed this podcast.
Cool. Okay, guys, that's it today. And have a good day.
All right, ciao.
Ciao, ciao.
Ciao.